We're always hearing about protecting our vision, right? Like eat your carrots and take your vitamins and all that.
Right.
But what if I told you that there's this nutrient kind of working behind the scenes that's like super important for your eyes?
Yeah.
And even wilder, some new research is saying that keeping the right amount of this nutrient could actually be the key to preventing or even treating some vision problems.
That's a really interesting area of study, and this new research that actually just came out this month in Cell Metabolism really takes a deep dive into the connection between a specific amino acid, serine, and a degenerative eye disease you might have heard of called macular telangiectasia, or MacTel.
And MacTel, for those who don't know, can really mess with your central vision. And for a long time, we haven't really understood what causes it.
Right.
So let's break down this research a bit. First of all, why is serine, this seemingly ordinary amino acid, so important for eyes?
Well, you're right. Serine on its own might seem kind of ordinary, but for the retina, which is that part of the eye that captures light and lets us see it's anything but ordinary,
Right.
the retina uses a ton of energy, meaning it needs a constant, and I mean significant supply of energy and certain nutrients to function the way it should.
Yeah.
And serine is critical in a lot of cellular processes in the retina, from making energy to even protecting cells from damage.
Okay, so it's like serine is the high-octane fuel keeping our retinal engines running smoothly.
Exactly.
But here's where it gets really interesting. The retina, it seems, doesn't just have one way to get its serine fix. It actually has three.
Yeah.
It's like having a triple redundancy system in place.
Yeah, that is a great way to put it. The research really highlights this unique thing about the retina.
Okay.
So the primary source, as you probably guess, is delivery through the bloodstream.
Makes sense.
That's our body's main supply route for getting nutrients around. And serine basically hitches a ride on this highway straight to the retina.
So that means that what we eat, our diet has a direct impact on how healthy our retinas are, right?
Absolutely. And it's not even just about getting enough serine in our diet. It's also about making sure our bodies can actually absorb it properly and, transport it to where it's needed.
Right.
But this is where the retina gets really clever. It also has these two backup systems in place, almost like a fail-safe, if you will.
Okay, I'm hooked. Tell me more about these backup systems.
Okay, so the second source is local production. The retina can actually make or synthesize some of its own serine from glucose,
Oh, wow.
which is a type of sugar our bodies use for energy. This process, by the way, it's called de novo synthesis. It's actually similar to what happens in the brain, another one of those organs with really high energy demands.
Wow, so our eyes have a little internal factory for making this essential nutrient.
Yeah.
That's incredible. But what happens when our eyes need more serine than our bloodstream and this internal factory can provide?
That's where the third source comes in, recycling. The retina, it's amazing. It can actually regenerate serine from another amino acid called glycine.
Wow.
Think of it like a super efficient recycling plant, making sure that even when things are scarce, the retina still has some way to keep its serine levels up. This whole intricate system just goes to show how important serine is for our vision.
It's really amazing how our bodies have evolved these complicated mechanisms to protect something as valuable as our sight.
Yeah.
But like with any complex system, sometimes things go wrong.
Right.
And that's where this research on MacTel comes in, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
One of the things that got this research going was that they observed that people with MacTel often have lower than normal serine levels in their blood. So the researchers, they wanted to figure out if this deficiency could actually be contributing to the disease.
Interesting.
And what they found was super insightful.
Okay, so let's talk about their findings. Did they figure out why some people might be low on serine?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
Their research suggests that some people with MacTel have genetic differences that affect how well they can either produce serine or even just use it correctly.
Interesting.
It's like having a glitch in the system, right?
Yeah.
Either in the factory's blueprints or in the recycling plant's instruction manual.
Right, right. So this research is pointing to a potential link between genetics, serine deficiency, and then MacTel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to really dig deeper into how this deficiency might actually be affecting the retina, at a cellular level, they turn to a really powerful tool in medical research. Mice. Mice are actually used a lot in these kinds of studies because they have like surprisingly similar genetics and physiology to us humans, especially when you're talking about vision.
Yeah, it is kind of wild how much we can learn about ourselves from these little guys. So how did the researchers use mice to understand this whole serine-MacTel connection better? Like, did they just put them on a low serine diet and see what happened?
Well, it was a little more complicated than that. They actually took it a step further and genetically modified some of the mice.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, to mimic the genetic predisposition that some people with MacTel have for being serine deficient. So then they put some of these mice on a diet with zero serine and glycine.
Okay, so they basically cut off two of the three serine supply routes that we were talking about earlier, the direct delivery from the blood and then the recycling pathway.
Exactly.
That seems like a pretty rough deal for those mice.
The goal was to try and really replicate what might make someone more susceptible to developing MacTel in the first place. And what they found was actually really interesting.
What did they find? Did this combo of the genetic predisposition and the diet restriction actually have a big impact on the mice?
It did. The mice with the genetic modification and the no serine glycine diet developed retinal damage way faster than the mice who are just on the restrictive diet.
Interesting.
Yeah. And it just goes to show how important the interplay is between your genetics and then also environmental factors like what you eat in terms of, whether you develop a disease or not.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's like a good reminder that our genes aren't necessarily our destiny.
Right.
There's a lot we can do to kind of nudge things in the right direction through our lifestyle choices. And in this case, it seems like diet is a big one.
It really is.
So if not having enough serine can be so bad for our retinas, are there certain foods that we should be eating to make sure that we're getting enough?
For sure.
Yeah.
That's where this research gets really practical.
Yeah.
Foods that are packed with serine and glycine can be really great for your retinal health. Good sources of serine are things like soybeans, nuts, eggs, dairy products.
Gotcha.
Glycine you can find in bone-in meats, poultry, with the skin on bone broth gelatin.
Okay, so making sure to eat a balanced diet with plenty of those serine and glycine-rich foods could be a tasty way to support our retinal health. I like it.
Right.
But what about people who are already having vision problems, maybe even like early signs of MacTel? Is it too late for them to make a difference with their diet?
That is the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And this is where the research gets even more interesting. The researchers, they didn't stop at just, looking at the damage from not having enough serine. They wanted to know if that damage could be reversed.
Okay, so they caused the problem, saw what happened, and then tried to fix it. Did it work? Were they able to reverse the retinal damage in the mice?
You're going to love this.
Yeah.
After being on this serine and glycine-free diet for a while,
Yeah.
some of the mice, they switched back to a normal diet, and then others got a diet with extra serine. And get this, both groups saw a reversal of the retinal damage and the other problems that the serine deficiency had caused.
Wait, they reversed the damage? So even after their systems were depleted, their retinas basically bounced back?
Yeah.
That's amazing. Does that mean that the retinal cells weren't, permanently damaged, but that their function was just kind of on hold?
That is the question, isn't it? This finding opens up a whole new avenue for possible treatments.
Yeah.
It seems like the lack of serine might not actually be killing off those retinal cells for good, but instead it's just messing with their ability to work the right way.
Yeah.
And once they got that serine back, it was like they woke up and got back to business.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Are you saying that something as simple as just making sure you're eating enough serine could be the key to not just preventing, but also maybe treating vision problems like MacTel?
Well, it's definitely too soon to say for sure. Further research, especially in humans, is definitely needed.
Right.
But this study offers a really compelling clue. It suggests that keeping your serine levels healthy, whether it's through diet or maybe even targeted supplements down the road, could be a game changer in preventing or treating MacTel and maybe even other vision problems.
This is huge. So for our listeners out there who are probably wondering how this research applies to them, what would you say is the main takeaway?
That's a great question. I would say that this research, even though it was done in mice, gives us valuable insights into how our own vision works. It reminds us that there are these really complex things happening in our eyes all the time, and they rely on this delicate balance of nutrients like serine. And while we can't really control our genes, we can definitely make choices that affect how those genes actually express themselves.
It really makes you feel like you have some power over the situation, right?
Right.
We often feel kind of helpless when it comes to our health, especially with something as complicated as vision loss. But this research is saying that we might actually have more control than we think.
I totally agree. It shows just how important knowledge is. Like if we understand these really complex mechanisms in our bodies, it can help us make better choices and even take steps to prevent problems down the road.
Totally. It makes you wonder, though, if something as basic as serine can have such a huge impact on our vision, what other things are we missing? Like, what else could be affecting our eye health that we don't even realize?
That's what keeps researchers going.
Right.
There's still so much we don't know. For example, we're learning more and more about how inflammation and something called oxidative stress play a role in eye diseases.
Mm.
There are even studies going on right now looking into what the long-term effects of blue light from our devices are doing to our retinal health.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it, and kind of a little overwhelming to realize how much we still have to learn about something as basic as vision. But it's also super exciting to think about all the future discoveries and treatments that are out there.
For sure. And this research on Serine and MacTel,
Mm.
it's a perfect example of how scientific curiosity and really thorough research can uncover new ways to understand and hopefully treat diseases.
Absolutely. It really highlights why it's so important to support scientific research, especially in fields like vision health that affect so many people.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, I think that about wraps up our deep dive into the fascinating world of Serene and how crucial it is for healthy vision. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling really hopeful. And like I said before, I have some agency when it comes to my eye health.
Yeah, me too. It's been great talking about all of this with you and your listeners today.
Thanks for joining us.
Of course. And to everyone listening, remember, knowledge is power, and it's never too soon to start taking care of your vision.
So true. To our listeners, we hope you found this deep dive informative and maybe even inspiring. And as always, if you have any concerns about your eye health, please talk to your doctor. Until next time, stay curious and keep your eyes healthy.